Welcome to the Arrive U.S. Immigration Law podcast with your hosts Jeremy Richards and Christine Jerusik. Join us as we navigate the complex world of U.S. immigration law with a special focus on opportunities and challenges for Canadians and Mexicans under the USMCA. Whether you're a professional, business owner, or family member seeking to work and live in the United States, we're here to guide you every step of the way. So sit back and relax. You have arrived. Welcome back to another episode of the Arrive podcast for our Canadian friends up north. Today we are doubling down on an episode where we're going to be discussing, again, this alien registration requirement. And we talked about it a little in our last episode, but a lot more detail has come out as to how this program works and who it applies to and what you should expect if you are subject to this alien registration requirement. It really sounds a lot scarier than it is. And the program that they're instating with this registration program is really for immigration enforcement. They're really doing it to influence people in the United States already who have overstayed a visa and shouldn't be in the United States to self-deport and to report who they are and then to let the government know that they're leaving the country.
And so when you say it isn't as scary as it sounds, it may be for some people if they're here.
I guess if you're here illegally,
right?
It's scary.
I mean, if you're here and you're not in status anymore, it could be an issue. Then it's scary. But for most of our listeners who are trying to do the right thing,
Canadians, it typically is not. You're not typically not going to fall into that category.
Exactly.
And most of our listeners, I think they listen because they're trying to do this the right way.
They're trying to follow the
right?
rules. Yeah.
So if you're trying to follow the rules, if you're a law-abiding citizen, if you're trying to follow the immigration laws,
and make sure you don't run afoul of them. And here's a new obligation. Let's figure out how to move forward with that.
Exactly. But that's the history behind this. That's what it's really there for. And if you're following the news, which can be scary when they talk about it, that's what it's really for. And Department of Homeland Security said they're taking this seriously for individuals who don't follow this registration requirement, that they're going to be removing people, fining people. I mean, the fines are pretty severe, $5,000 fine and up to 30 days in jail or both if you don't comply with the alien registration requirement. So let's dig into it now that we have the details. This goes into effect just so that everybody listening knows on April 11th. That's when you are required, if you fall into an individual that needs to register, you need to comply with this starting on April 11th of 2025.
But the registration is live now.
It is live.
So if you know you are going to need to comply with this requirement, you can take action at them right now.
Yep. You don't have to wait. So if you know come April 11th that you're going to be in the United States for 30 days or more, and you don't have an I-94 record of admission, you're not on a work visa, you don't have a green card or another status in the United States.
And you don't have a green card application pending with USCIS right now?
Or a pending application with USCIS, correct? Then you would be subject to this registration requirement. Now, understanding who is subject is important because that's how you're going to determine whether or not you need to worry about this. Well, everyone who enters the United States and is here over 30 days and it's consecutive days, and this is another clarification to make. Canadians are used to their ability to travel to the United States as visitors, and they track what they call the 180-day rule, right? How much time have I spent in the United States this year? Have I hit the 6 months or the 180 days? Well, when CBP is looking at that, they're looking at total days throughout the year, and they add them up for all of your visits. It doesn't have to be one consecutive visit. You could come for 3 weeks and then 5 weeks and then 2 weeks. They're going to add all that time up throughout the year to see how much time you spent in the U.S. as a visitor. That's not how this 30-day rule works. The 30-day rule is consecutive days in the United States. So if you come to the United States on a frequent basis and let's say you come every month for 2 weeks, but then you go back to Canada. Well, it doesn't apply to you unless you hit the 30-day mark. So if you're coming back and forth for stays less than 30 days, you don't even have to worry about it because you're not 30 days or more. Now, if you come, and I just spoke to an individual on the phone who has been here for 45 days. Flew in, though. He flew in. Well, most of the time when you fly into the United States, you are issued an I-94 record admission when you fly. This mainly applies to those who are driving into the United States. Oftentimes when you drive in, for some reason, CBP at land ports doesn't always issue an I-94 record of admission. So if you're driving into the United States and you are staying over 30 days and you were not issued a record of admission, then you would be subject to this registration requirement.
Well, and let's be clear, it does apply to people who fly in. So even regardless of how they typically are. So I think the point that we want to hammer home here is that you should always check your I-94 when you come in. That's the first step in determining whether or not this is going to apply to you, this requirement, this additional step that you need to take. If you come into the United States, you're issued an I-94, even if you're staying longer than 30 days and you've been admitted for that period of time, longer than 30 days, you don't need to register.
Yep. And how do you check that? Well, it's fairly easy. You can just Google CBP I-94 and it'll pull up the CBP I-94 website. And you can go into there and you can put in your passport information and it will show what your current status in the United States is. And if you were admitted, it will pull up what's called an I-94 record of admission. It'll say the date that you came into the country. It'll also say the date you were authorized to stay and the status that you were admitted in, such as a visitor or a TN or an L or an E, whatever that might be. So it's incumbent on you really to know that.
Yeah, and they'll have issued you an I-94 number as well.
Yes.
And our advice is print that out, save it to your phone, keep it with you, and that way you're going to have a reminder of when you need to leave by. And it's also going to be evidence that you were properly admitted to the United States if you encounter any immigration authorities while you're here.
Yep, exactly. And if you are in a situation where you look it up and you see that you were admitted as a non-controlled Canadian is what it's referred to, and you were not issued an I-94, that's when you need to pay extra attention to making sure that you are properly registered. Now, how does registration happen? Well, there's two ways you can do it. One of them is the proactive approach. So there's an app that CBP has. It's called CBP Home or CBP One.
It's really weird. It's called CBP Home, and it's an actual app you can download to your phone. But when you go into it and you start entering the information, it switches over to CBP One. I don't know, which I think is a defunct app now. So I think they're just reusing information.
Biden's app, and Trump didn't like it, so
he rebranded
it CBP Home.
Right. And I'm actually looking at it right now. And so when you pull up that app and you register, you just get the app on your phone, you have the options to apply for an I-94 in advance. That's what we're talking about here.
Yep.
There's another selection here, which I hadn't seen previously, but it also says report my arrival. And when I click on that, that's not live yet. So that might be something that's still coming where you can report your arrival after you've already entered the U.S.
If they don't properly admit you.
I-94.
So if you're coming by
so
land.
it looks like that's still coming. But right now, what you want to do is hit that apply for an I-94 in advance before you come to the United States to ensure that you are issued an I-94 when you enter, and then this registration requirement's not going to apply to you. Right.
And it's important to understand you can only do this within 7 days of your travel, okay? So you can't do it more than 7 days in advance. But you can. And either you can do it through the app or the previous website that I did mention, the CBP I-94 website. You can also get paid for and get an I-94 in advance through the website as well.
Right. If you don't want to download an app to your phone, maybe you don't like apps and you just want to do it as like a guest user, right?
So you have both options. And that's the way to take control of this yourself, right? And make sure you have that in advance. Make sure you are compliant. Also, that same app gives you the ability to track your exit. So CBP, again, isn't always the best at tracking when you depart the country. So the app gives you an exit feature where you can report when you have departed the United States. Again, tracking your time spent in the U.S. to show that you are complying, you haven't overstayed, and we're spent too much time in the United States. Now, The other option to register is after you're in the United States and you notice that you did not get an I-94, then you can go to the USCIS website and you can create an individual account. And it's important when you create an account, you have options through USCIS to be either an organization, a legal representative, or an individual, to create an individual account with USCIS. And then when you go in, it'll give you an option to file a form online, and with a drop-down menu of all the different forms you can file. And the form that you would file to register is called G325R, Biographic Information Registration. And you can do that after entry to the United States. So maybe you're already in the United States and you're going to pass that 30-day mark come April 11th. Well, you can go on now and you can create an account with USCIS and you can complete the G325R. Or if you find yourself in a situation where that registration applies to you, that's how you do it. You go to the USCIS website and you complete that. Now, both the app and the G325R through USCIS require the same information. They're just collecting it differently. So we're just going to go over briefly what you're going to be required to provide if you have to do this G325R, or if you're using the app to get that I-94 in advance. Basic information about yourself. So your name, your contact information, when and where you were born, your address history, your immigration history, and your police and your criminal record. They're also going to ask about your family.
The nice thing about the app is it gives you the opportunity just to scan a document and it will upload all the information for you. So if you're someone who likes to do things quickly, that's an option as well.
Pre-populated for you. But this is, and it's going to ask if you're married or unmarried. It's going to ask about your parents, what their citizenship is. It's also going to give you the opportunity to upload evidence where necessary. Mm-hmm. For example, if you do have a criminal record, or maybe you got a waiver that allows you to enter the United States because you did have a past violation, whatever it is where you might have to upload some information. It gives you the option to upload documents as well. And you can upload statements if a statement is required to explain your situation, your purpose of travel. Maybe you're coming as a visitor and you're staying long term, and you want to provide proof of your hotel accommodations, or you're visiting a relative and they have a letter of invitation saying you're staying with them, whatever it might be. Proof of your financial ability to financially support yourself during your stay, things like that could be necessary for long-term visits. And then you would submit that with USCIS. Now, here's the one important thing to keep in mind. Well, first of all, it's free. You don't have to pay if you're doing a G325R. There's no fee. But
yet,
they're saying it's free. But
free right now.
What will happen is you will then get a follow-up notice for a biometrics appointment with USCIS. So that's the big difference. If you're doing it in advance, you're not going to have to do this because it's done either at the airport or it's done at the port of entry.
Well, if you do it in advance, so if you file for that I-94 in advance, it still says you may be subject to providing your biometrics at the border.
The border, right. Correct. But what this does, though, is it requires an additional step. So if you're in the United States on vacation or traveling, you're going to have to provide an address that's going to be tied to a field office in the United States to collect your biometrics. And you're going to have to go to a biometrics appointment. So this is just something you have to worry about registering, attending this biometrics appointment. What is a biometrics appointment? Where it's where they take your photograph and your fingerprints, and they do a background check on you to make sure there's nothing in your history, criminal history or immigration history, that would cause concern. So if you're doing it after the fact, and you're subject to the G325R, and you have to file that with USCIS, keep in mind you have to do this biometrics as a part of it as well. And failure to complete the biometrics, it means you failed to register. You're not officially registered until you do that. So it is really to your advantage. And
we're not sure if that's the case with the I-94. I'm interested to see if you register for an I-94 in advance, whether they're going to haul you into secondary. You know, a Canadian citizen.
Typically, an I-94
to do biometrics. Yeah, it says on the app that they can do that.
Typically, it is part of it, and they can do it. And we see this with all the applications we file, right? If they already have your biometrics on record, they could waive it and say, we don't need it. We already have it, right? So if you've done your biometrics recently, or maybe you flew in at one time, or maybe you had a work visa and they have current biometrics on you, it may be waived. But in the end, a part of this process is supposed to include the biometrics, the fingerprinting, the photograph, again, for national security reasons, to make sure that people are properly vetted coming into the United States. Also, another question that we get a lot is, well, what if I'm a part of Global Entry, or what if I'm a part of Nexus, or what if I have an enhanced driver's license? Does that exempt me from the alien registration requirement?
Oh, you're looking at me. Yeah, no, it doesn't exempt you from any of the requirements. It's a separate program.
It's a separate program. And think of it this, those are travel documents, right? Nexus is an expedited way to get to the United States. You've been pre-vetted and they've found you to be worthy of an expedited processing at a port of entry and to use a special lane. Well, it doesn't give you status. You still have to come to the border and tell them why you're coming in on that Nexus card, and then they will admit you in the proper status, which would then typically mean you're giving an I-94 as well.
I can see why people would be confused, though, because you do give your biometrics when you apply for Nexus, right? So they're like, well, is that part of this? Like, I've already done that.
Correct, which means, back to your point, they may not collect your biometrics with an I-94 if you have a Nexus because you've already done the biometrics. So that's where they have the discretion.
They have access to it. Yeah,
they could waive your biometrics in certain situations. So you may not have to complete the biometrics, but you still have to get an I-94. And
I just see this as a real headache at the border in the summer when if people are registering for their I-94 in advance. What's the lineup going to be like outside of secondary to go in and give fingerprints in July? That will be nuts.
So I was looking at this alien registration requirement. I was looking at I-94 and doing advanced I-94s. And I looked at one of our past blogs and an update from CBP. And don't quote me on the date, but it was somewhere in 2023. We have a blog that talks about this update from CBP. And it says that CBP is now encouraging you to, guess what? Get I-94s in advance of your travel to the United States. So
that's probably when this thing went live.
Yeah. And then prior to that is when we saw CBP transitioning away from physical I-94s, because everyone used to get a physical card stamped in their passport and a physical stamp. And they've been transitioning away slowly to digitize everything and attach it electronically to your passport. And then once they got comfortable with that, now they're saying, oh, we want everyone to do electronic I-94s. And we're seeing this progression here of turning everything completely digital. So it's to your advantage if you jump on board and you do pre-registration and you take control and track this yourselves. If it were me and I spent that amount of time in the United States, and I think this...
Like a snowbird, you mean?
Snowbirds, yeah, retirees.
Because there's actually, like, when you go into the I-94 registration site, it gives you options, and you can be like, track my compliance, and it will actually pull up your dates for you and let you know whether you've been compliant with the requirements. And it also lets the immigration authorities know. So you should have an easier time at the border if you do this in advance.
Yep. So hopefully this helps you understand what this alien registration requirement is. Again, if you're coming to the United States for legitimate reasons, as long as you track your exits and your entries and you make sure that you've been admitted properly, you're not going to have a problem. Be aware that it is a requirement, though. And
I'd say like 90% of Canadians coming in, I mean, would you say like 80% coming in through the land ports or getting an I-94?
I don't know.
Do you think it's around that number?
I think it's lower.
You do? Okay.
Yes, I do.
I don't know.
I don't have faith in that process.
I mean, I like to think that our CBP officers are issuing I-94s to Canadian visitors, like around 80% of the time. It could be lower.
Half the time I'm in line and I'm waiting to come back. I was just in Canada over the weekend. The cars in front of you go so quickly. To me, it's like they're not even doing it. They're just like, what are you coming in for? Oh, you're going to the outlets? All right, have a nice day.
Yeah.
Right? And
But then those people, it doesn't really matter because they're not staying for 30 days, right?
But if you end up staying over, you are subject, and they didn't give you a 994. I mean, me and my family, there was like 6 of us in the car. We gave over our stuff. Didn't scan a single doc. Didn't even really ask any questions. I think.
Didn't you have Nexus though?
Yeah, but not everyone in the car did, so we had to go through a normal lane.
Didn't you scan your Nexus cards before you went in the lane?
No. So we had family visiting, so they didn't have Nexus cards and they were using normal passports. So we all went through the normal.
Yeah, but you handed them over to the officer and they reviewed them. Yeah. So,
but it just depends on the officer. Sometimes they scan every card and every passport and they ask you a extensive line of questions, and sometimes they don't ask you any questions at all, right? So
that's true.
We just said the right things, right?
Well, yeah, and they obviously, you all had your documents.
We had our documents.
And you were gone for 1 day. So coming back into the U.S., and plus you're all U.S. citizens.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, you get a little different treatment there.
You do. So, but yeah, it depends. And it's up to you in the end to track that information and make sure you were admitted and you did get a 994. It's no one else's responsibility to manage that but you. Right. And if you don't do it, guess what CBP is going to tell you? You say, oh, I didn't know. Well, I don't care. You didn't know. You're supposed to know. It's your job to know.
Right.
They so don't have any mercy when you do that.
No. But bottom line, who isn't this subject to this? People who are staying for less than 30 days.
Yep.
Don't need to worry about it.
If you are, make sure you're compliant.
You're coming in a March break. You're going to Disney. You're going to Florida. You're going to New York City for a long weekend. You're going to work.
Couple weeks, doesn't matter.
Yeah, you're going to meetings down in California for a week or two. This doesn't apply to you.
So and I'm just going to talk about potentially how it could come back to bite you. And we don't know in the end how serious they are on enforcing this. And I'm just talking about if they actually enforce it the way they say they're going to.
This is crystal ball stuff right here.
If you were to come into the United States, you were to stay over 30 days, well, there are consequences that they have threatened to impose on people of the $5,000 fine, of 30 days in jail, or both, if you don't comply with this. I don't see them enforcing this at that level. They could.
For Canadian visitors.
Yeah, it'd be very hard for them to do that. But what?
Right. So if you have elderly parents that are here down in Florida right now that haven't complied with this, they've been here more than 30 days. Should they be worried?
I would still register them if you know they're going to be here past April 11th.
I would do that.
I wouldn't mess around with it.
No.
And here's why I wouldn't. Even if they don't fine you and throw you in jail, well, know what the easy thing for them to do is? If you come back to the border and you stayed over 30 days past April 11th and they see you didn't follow the alien registration requirement, they could say, you're not coming back in the U.S. That's an immigration violation. You were supposed to register and you didn't.
They could send you into secondary inspection.
And they could refuse you. And they could say, nope, that's
last time you came, you did not comply with U.S. immigration laws. We're denying your entry right now.
So I see that as the easy way for them to enforce it.
Yeah.
They could be lenient and say, you know what? I know you didn't know about it, and they could let you in. But they could also say no. So if you have a warning
next time you do this, you're not going to be admitted. And put a note.
Or they could give you no warning, which we see a lot, and say, forget it. No, you were supposed to do this and you didn't.
Yeah.
Come back in 6 months.
Right.
Right? Yeah. And maybe you have a home, maybe you have pets, or who knows what you have in the U.S. that's bringing you back. And you didn't comply, and now you're stuck in Canada, and there's nothing you can do about it because you didn't do the alien registration requirement. So there are potential severe consequences, but then there's also, and that's pretty severe to me too, not being able to come back in when you need to. So just be aware that this is your responsibility. You need to track it. You need to make sure you're compliant, and there are consequences, potential consequences if you don't.
Yeah. A lot of our Canadians don't want to come to the United States right now anyway because of the tariffs.
Yeah,
they're not happy. They're not happy with the U.S. right now. Not. So they're not considering coming here for vacation.
Hey, I'm going to Canada.
There's a lot of other beautiful places to go, and I get it.
I spent the entire weekend in Niagara Falls and in Toronto because the family was in town. But hey, I love Canada. And guess what? Canadian candy, amazing.
You're talking about like
crispy crunch.
Chocolate bars?
Oh yeah, the crispy crunch. Oh, what's that other one?
We do. Our candy's
the Wonder
better.
Bar.
The Wonder Bar.
I love
even
the
Canadian Kit Kat's better than the U.S. Kit Kat.
And then
in my opinion,
not the Canadian gummies. I call them gummies. What are they called?
Oh, wine gums.
Wine gums.
Yeah,
Oh,
Maynard's wine gums.
We had to make our special stop.
We don't have
Walmart
those here
when we were in Canada to get all our Canadian goods, and
that's why I have my grocery list every time I go up.
So I still go to Canada. I understand people don't want to visit, and they have their reasons, and I respect that.
But when you do come back, just know there's a new rule.
Yep.
A little bit has changed.
30-day
do your due diligence before you come. Make sure you register for that I-94. And if you don't, even if you do, check and make sure you got one. And if you don't, then make sure if you're going to stay for 30 days or more, you're going to register online.
Yep. Well, hopefully this provides some clarity on this regulation that the Trump administration has said that they're going to enforce. And hopefully you understand it. If you do have any other questions about the alien registration requirement, working or living in the United States, anything U.S. immigration law related, that's what we're here for. Thank you for tuning in, and have a great day.